Emma Carter checked her phone for the third time in 5 minutes, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble sidewalk as she rushed toward the Grand Meridian Hotel. The charity gala had started 20 minutes ago, and she could already imagine her client's disappointed face. As the lead coordinator for Elite Events Boston, punctuality wasn't just important, it was everything. But tonight, the universe seemed determined to test her. First, the dry cleaner had given her the wrong dress. Then her subway train stalled between stations for 15 agonizing minutes. Now here she was, racing through the October evening air, her emerald green dress swishing around her legs with each hurried step. The Grand Meridian rose before her like a glittering tower of glass and light. Its revolving doors spun continuously, releasing well-dressed guests into the cool evening air. Emma paused just outside, taking a moment to catch her breath and smooth down her dress. The silk fabric felt cool against her flushed skin. She checked her reflection in the glass door, tucking a stray curl of auburn hair behind her ear. Her gray eyes stared back at her, bright with a mixture of anxiety and determination. Inside, the lobby was a symphony of cream marble and gold accents. Crystal chandeliers hung from the soaring ceiling, casting warm light over the crowd of elegantly dressed guests making their way toward the ballroom. Emma followed the flow, her heart still racing as she approached the grand double doors. 2 attendants in crisp black suits pulled them open, and suddenly she was stepping into another world. The ballroom was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined the far wall, offering a breathtaking view of the Boston skyline at dusk. Round tables draped in champagne-colored linens filled the space, each topped with elaborate centerpieces of white orchids and trailing ivy. A stage occupied one end of the room, where a jazz quartet played soft, sophisticated melodies. And everywhere, were people. Boston's elite in their finest evening wear, champagne flutes in hand, laughing and chatting beneath the glow of Art Deco-inspired lighting fixtures. Emma's entrance did not go unnoticed. Several heads turned as she walked in, and she felt the familiar heat rising in her cheeks. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. She preferred working behind the scenes, making sure every detail was perfect so that others could shine. But tonight, in this dress that caught the light with every movement, she couldn't help but draw eyes. Across the room, standing near the bar with a glass of scotch in his hand, Julian Montgomery felt the shift in the atmosphere before he saw its cause. He had been listening to a real estate colleague drone on about market projections, nodding politely while his mind wandered elsewhere. At 42, Julian had attended more of these events than he could count. They all blurred together eventually into a monotonous parade of small talk and networking. He came because it was expected, because his company's reputation demanded visibility, because writing checks to worthy causes was what billionaires did. But then the ballroom doors opened, and everything changed. She walked in like she owned the room, despite the slight flush on her cheeks that suggested she knew she was late. Her dress was the color of deep emeralds, fitted perfectly to her curves before flowing gracefully to just above her knees. Auburn curls cascaded over bare shoulders, and even from this distance, Julian could see the sparkle of intelligence in her eyes as they swept across the room. She moved with purpose, weaving between tables with an apologetic smile for those she passed, but there was grace in every step. Julian found himself staring, his colleague's voice fading into meaningless background noise. He watched her pause near the silent auction tables, her fingers trailing absently over a donation form as her eyes continued to scan the crowd. She was looking for someone, he realized. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he desperately wanted it to be him. "Julian? Are you listening?" His colleague's irritated voice broke through his trance. "I'm sorry, what?" Julian turned back, but his attention was already lost. The colleague followed his gaze and smirked. "Ah, I see. That's Emma Carter, isn't she? Works for Elite Events. Supposed to be brilliant at what she does. Little young for you though, don't you think?" Julian ignored the comment, his eyes drawn back to the woman in green. Emma. The name fit her somehow. She had stopped to speak with an older woman near the stage, bending slightly to hear over the music, her expression warm and attentive. When she smiled, it transformed her entire face, lighting her up from within. "Excuse me," Julian said abruptly, setting his glass down on the nearest table. He didn't wait for a response, already moving across the ballroom with the kind of focused determination that had built his empire. Emma finished reassuring Mrs. Pemberton that the evening was running smoothly despite her late arrival and straightened up, allowing herself a small sigh of relief. The crisis was averted. Now she just needed to check in with the catering staff and make sure the auction was on schedule. She turned to head toward the kitchen doors and nearly collided with a wall of expensive suit. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she began, stepping back quickly. Then she looked up, and the apology died on her lips. The man standing before her was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal gray suit perfectly. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples, strong jawline, and eyes the color of storm clouds stared down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wasn't classically handsome in the way of movie stars or models, but there was something magnetic about him, something that made it impossible to look away. "No harm done," he said, and his voice was deep and smooth like aged whiskey. "Although I should apologize for standing in your path. You looked like you were on a mission." "I'm always on a mission at these events," Emma replied, finding her voice though it came out slightly breathless. "Occupational hazard of being an event coordinator." "Ah, so you're the brilliant mind behind all this." He gestured to the room around them. "It's spectacular. Though I have to say, the most spectacular thing walked in about 5 minutes ago." Emma felt heat rising in her cheeks again, but she met his gaze steadily. "That's quite a line." "It's not a line if it's true." His lips curved into a slight smile, and Emma noticed the way it softened his features, made him seem less intimidating and more approachable. "I'm Julian Montgomery." Recognition sparked in Emma's eyes. Julian Montgomery, the real estate mogul whose name appeared regularly in the business section of the Boston Globe. His company, Montgomery Development, had transformed the city's skyline with luxury residential towers and mixed-use complexes. He was known for his sharp business sense and his even sharper negotiating skills. And he was standing here, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. "Emma Carter," she said, extending her hand. "And thank you. For the compliment about the event, I mean." His hand enveloped hers, warm and firm, and he held on just a fraction longer than professionally necessary. "The pleasure is mine, Emma Carter. Tell me, does the brilliant event coordinator ever get to actually enjoy the events she creates?" "Not usually," Emma admitted with a rueful smile. "I'm too busy making sure everything runs smoothly." "That seems like a terrible waste." Julian released her hand slowly, his fingers trailing against her palm in a way that sent unexpected shivers up her arm. "Perhaps you could make an exception tonight. The terrace is open, and the view of the city at sunset is something everyone should experience at least once." Emma hesitated. She should check on the caterers. She should verify the auction timeline. She should be doing 100 different things that had nothing to do with following this dangerously attractive stranger onto a terrace. But something in his eyes, some genuine warmth beneath the confident exterior, made her want to say yes. Just for a few minutes, she heard herself say. Julian's smile widened, and he offered her his arm. "That's all I ask." They walked together through the ballroom, and Emma was acutely aware of the curious glances following them. Julian Montgomery didn't just attend events, he commanded them. Having his attention so clearly focused on her felt both thrilling and terrifying. The terrace doors were open, gauzy curtains billowing gently in the evening breeze. Julian held one aside for her, and Emma stepped out into the October air. The terrace was expansive, wrapping around the entire top floor of the hotel. Potted trees and strategic lighting created intimate spaces despite the open area. But it was the view that took Emma's breath away. Boston stretched out before them, the Charles River reflecting the last rays of sunset in shades of gold and rose. Buildings lit up one by one as dusk deepened into night, creating a constellation of urban stars. "Oh," Emma breathed, moving to the railing. "I've coordinated 3 events at this hotel, and I've never actually come out here." Julian joined her at the railing, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Then I'm glad I could give you this." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city transform. Emma could still hear the muted sounds of the party behind them, the jazz quartet and the hum of conversation, but out here it felt like they existed in a separate world. "Can I ask you something?" Julian's voice was quiet, almost hesitant in a way that seemed at odds with his confident demeanor. "Of course. Why event planning? What made you choose a career where you work so hard to create beautiful moments for other people but rarely get to experience them yourself?" Emma considered the question, surprised by its depth. Most people at these events made small talk about weather or asked superficial questions about her job. But Julian seemed genuinely interested in understanding her. "My mother," she said finally, her voice soft with memory. "She ran a community center in Roxbury for 20 years. Every year she'd organize this massive holiday celebration for the neighborhood. She'd work herself to exhaustion planning it, decorating, coordinating volunteers. And I'd ask her why she didn't just enjoy the party instead of stressing over every detail. You know what she told me?" Julian shook his head, his full attention on her. "She said that joy is something you give, not just something you receive. That the real satisfaction comes from seeing other people happy, from knowing you created that happiness. She said there's a special kind of magic in being the person behind the scenes who makes magic happen for others." Emma smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "She passed away 2 years ago, but I think about those words every time I coordinate an event." "She sounds like an extraordinary woman," Julian said gently. "And she clearly raised an extraordinary daughter." Emma turned to look at him, ready to deflect the compliment with a joke or a change of subject. But the expression on his face stopped her. He wasn't just being polite or flattering. There was genuine admiration in those storm-gray eyes, and something else. Something that made her heart beat faster. "The community center," she said, not quite knowing why she was telling him this. "It's still running. I've been trying to keep it going since she died, but it's struggling. The building is old, we can barely afford repairs, and the neighborhood has been changing. Property values going up, developers buying everything around us." She laughed, but it came out bitter. "Sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. You're in real estate development. You probably think places like our center are obstacles to progress." "No," Julian said firmly, turning to face her fully. "I don't think that at all. What I think is that people like you and your mother, people who care about community and connection, are what make cities worth developing in the first place. Buildings are just steel and glass until people give them meaning." Emma searched his face, looking for signs of insincerity, but found none. "That's not what most developers think. Maybe I'm not most developers." He paused, then added quietly, "Or maybe I haven't been, until tonight." The weight of his words hung in the air between them. Emma felt something shifting, like tectonic plates moving deep beneath the surface. This wasn't just attraction, though that was certainly there. This was recognition, the sense that she was seeing someone, truly seeing them, and being seen in return. "Emma," Julian began, his hand moving to rest on the railing near hers, close enough that their fingers almost touched. "I know this is going to sound insane. We just met 20 minutes ago. But I feel like I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time." Her breath caught. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings. She didn't know this man. He was wealthy and powerful, from a completely different world than hers. This was exactly the kind of situation her practical nature usually steered her away from. But standing here under the darkening sky, with the city lights beginning to sparkle below and his eyes holding hers with such intensity, rational thought seemed irrelevant. It doesn't sound insane, she whispered. Or if it does, then I'm insane too. Julian's hand moved that final inch, covering hers on the railing. His touch was warm, solid, real. Tell me I'm not alone in feeling this. You're not alone. The jazz quartet inside shifted to a new song, something slow and achingly romantic. Julian stood and gently turned Emma to face him, one hand still holding hers while the other came to rest lightly on her waist. Dance with me. It wasn't really a question, and Emma didn't treat it like one. She stepped into his arms, and it felt like coming home. They moved together slowly, barely swaying to the music drifting out from the ballroom. This close, Emma could smell his cologne, something woody and masculine that made her want to lean in closer. She could feel the steady beat of his heart through his suit jacket. Could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. I have a confession, Julian murmured, his breath warm against her ear. I've been to 100 events like this one. Maybe more. And I've never felt a single moment as real as this. Emma tilted her head back to look at him. What makes this different? You. The single word was weighted with meaning. Everything about you. They continued to sway, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Emma knew she should be worried about her responsibilities inside. She knew she should maintain professional boundaries. She knew that whatever this was between them, it was dangerous and complicated and probably a terrible idea. But in that moment, with Julian's arms around her and the city lights sparkling below them like fallen stars, she couldn't bring herself to care. What happens now? She asked softly. Julian's hand tightened slightly on her waist. What do you want to happen? Emma considered the question. What did she want? She wanted to stay here in this bubble they'd created, where the real world with all its complications didn't exist. She wanted to know everything about this man who looked at her like she was something precious. She wanted to believe that sometimes, magic was real and instantaneous connections weren't just fairy tales. I want to know you, she said finally. Really know you. Not Julian Montgomery the billionaire developer, but just Julian. Something in his expression softened, became almost vulnerable. And I want to know Emma. Not the brilliant event coordinator, not the woman trying to save her mother's legacy. Just Emma. That could be complicated, she warned. The best things usually are. The terrace door opened behind them, and reality came rushing back in the form of Emma's assistant coordinator, looking harried. Emma, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we need you inside. There's an issue with the auction sound system. Emma stepped back from Julian's arms reluctantly, the spell broken but not forgotten. I have to go. I know. Julian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, but instead of just handing it to her, he took her hand and pressed the card into her palm, folding her fingers around it. Promise me this isn't the end. Emma looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. I promise. She turned to follow her assistant inside, but at the threshold, she looked back. Julian stood at the railing where they'd danced, his hands in his pockets, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The city lights behind him created a halo effect, making him look almost otherworldly. Inside, the party continued in full swing. Emma forced herself to focus on the sound system issue, on coordinating with the auctioneer, on all the details that made these events run smoothly. But part of her remained on that terrace, swaying in the arms of a man she barely knew but somehow understood completely. She didn't look at the business card until much later, when the event had concluded successfully and she was finally alone in the hotel's service elevator. His personal cell phone number was written on the back in strong, decisive handwriting, along with 3 words, "Please call me." Emma pressed the card to her chest and smiled. She would call him. Tomorrow, maybe, or the day after. When she'd had time to process what had happened tonight, to convince herself it wasn't just a dream spun from champagne bubbles and city lights. But deep down, she already knew the truth. Tonight had changed something fundamental inside her. She'd walked into that ballroom late and flustered, just trying to do her job. She was leaving as someone different. Someone who believed in possibility again. Someone who'd felt the earth shift beneath her feet when a stranger's eyes met hers across a crowded room. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage, and Emma stepped out into the harsh fluorescent lighting. Her car was waiting, ordinary and familiar. She climbed inside, started the engine, and sat for a moment, trying to reconcile the magical evening on the terrace with the mundane reality of her Honda Civic and the long drive home through Boston traffic. But then she caught sight of herself in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were bright, her cheeks flushed, and she was smiling in a way she hadn't smiled in a very long time. Whatever happened next, whatever complications arose from tonight, she couldn't regret it. Because Julian was right. In 100 events, 1,000 nights, she'd never felt a moment as real as the ones they'd shared on that terrace. And that had to mean something. Emma tucked his business card carefully into her purse, put the car in gear, and headed home through the glittering Boston night. Behind her, in the penthouse ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel, Julian Montgomery stood at the window watching the taillights disappear into traffic. He'd stayed after the event ended, unusual for him. His driver was waiting, his assistant had called twice, but he couldn't quite bring himself to leave yet. The terrace where they'd danced seemed to still hold the echo of her presence. He pulled out his phone and stared at the blank screen, resisting the urge to call her immediately. That would be too much, too soon. He needed to give her space, time to decide if what they'd felt was real or just a product of moonlight and music. But patience had never been his strong suit, especially not when it came to something he wanted. And he wanted Emma Carter with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified him. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would focus on work, on the dozen projects demanding his attention. Tomorrow he would be the Julian Montgomery everyone expected, focused, driven, always in control. But tonight, just for tonight, he allowed himself to be simply Julian, a man who'd met a woman in an emerald green dress and felt his entire world tilt on its axis. He pressed his hand against the cold glass of the window, as if he could somehow reach through it to wherever Emma was now. And he smiled, because for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something more powerful than ambition or success. He felt hope. Emma stood in the cramped office of the Roxbury Community Center, staring at the official letter in her hands. The words swam before her eyes, but their meaning was crystal clear. Montgomery Development Corporation had made an offer to purchase the entire block, including the community center. They were offering fair market value, the letter assured her. More than fair, actually. Generous compensation for what they called an aging facility in need of extensive repairs. She read the signature at the bottom of the letter 3 times, each reading making her stomach sink further. Julian Montgomery, Chief Executive Officer. It had been 5 days since the gala. 5 days during which Emma had replayed every moment on that terrace, every word they'd exchanged, every touch that had felt so genuine. She'd been planning to call him tonight, had finally worked up the courage to believe that maybe, just maybe, something real could grow from that magical evening. And now this. Emma, honey, you okay? Mrs. Patterson, the center's volunteer coordinator, poked her head into the office. You look like you've seen a ghost. Not a ghost, Emma said quietly, her voice hollow. Just the truth. She spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through the motions of her work while her mind raced. Was that what the gala had been about? Had Julian somehow known who she was, known about the community center? Had every word, every look, every tender moment been part of some elaborate manipulation to soften her up before dropping this bomb? No. She couldn't believe that. She wouldn't. The connection they'd shared had been too real, too powerful to be manufactured. But then how did she explain this letter? This offer that would destroy everything her mother had built? By the time the center closed at 8, Emma had made her decision. She pulled Julian's business card from her wallet, the edges already soft from the number of times she'd held it over the past 5 days. But instead of calling, she looked up the address of Montgomery Development's headquarters. Some conversations needed to happen face to face. The Montgomery building was a gleaming tower of steel and glass in the financial district, one of the newer additions to Boston's skyline. Emma had passed it countless times, had probably even admired its clean lines and modern aesthetic. Now it felt like an enemy fortress. She walked through the revolving doors into a lobby that screamed wealth and power. Marble floors reflected the light from crystal chandeliers. A massive abstract sculpture dominated the center of the space. Behind a curved reception desk, 2 impeccably dressed women monitored visitors with professional smiles. "I need to see Julian Montgomery," Emma said, walking up to the desk with more confidence than she felt. "Do you have an appointment?" The receptionist's smile never wavered, but her eyes swept over Emma's simple jeans and sweater with barely concealed judgment. "No, but he'll want to see me. Tell him Emma Carter is here." Something flickered in the receptionist's expression, recognition perhaps. "One moment please." She picked up the phone, spoke in low tones, then looked up at Emma with surprise. "Mr. Montgomery says to send you right up. Top floor, executive suite." The elevator ride felt eternal. Emma watched the numbers climb, her heart pounding harder with each floor. She clutched the letter in her hand, the paper now crumpled from her grip. The doors finally opened to a reception area that made the lobby look modest by comparison. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Boston. The furniture was all rich leather and dark wood. Fresh flowers perfumed the air. A woman in a sharp suit approached immediately. "Ms. Carter? I'm Rebecca, Mr. Montgomery's executive assistant. He's expecting you. Please, follow me." They walked down a hallway lined with architectural renderings of various Montgomery development projects. Emma recognized several of them, buildings she'd admired without knowing who built them. Each one was a testament to Julian's vision and success. Each one made her feel smaller, more out of place. Rebecca stopped at a set of double doors, knocked once, then opened them. "Ms. Carter to see you, sir." Emma stepped inside, and the doors closed softly behind her. Julian's office was enormous, dominated by windows that made it feel like he was suspended in the sky. A massive desk occupied one end, but Julian wasn't sitting behind it. He stood by the windows, his back to her, hands in his pockets. Even from behind, she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Emma." He turned, and the expression on his face was complicated. Relief, anxiety, hope, and something that might have been dread all mixed together. "I've been hoping you'd call." "Have you?" Emma held up the crumpled letter. "Is that why you sent me this?" Julian's face fell. "You got the letter. Did you know?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "At the gala, when I told you about the community center, did you already know your company was planning to buy it?" "No." Julian took a step toward her, then stopped when she took a step back. "Emma, I swear I didn't know. That acquisition has been in development for months, handled by my team. I don't personally review every property purchase. When I saw that letter this morning, when I realized what building we were talking about, I tried to call you." Emma pulled out her phone, saw 3 missed calls from his number. She'd been so angry, so hurt, she hadn't even looked at her phone all afternoon. "So it's just a coincidence? You meet me, we have this incredible connection, and 5 days later I find out you're trying to destroy my mother's legacy?" "I'm not trying to destroy anything." Julian's voice was pained. "Emma, please, let me explain the project. We're planning a mixed-use development for that area. Affordable housing, retail space, community amenities. It's designed to revitalize the neighborhood. By tearing down what already exists. By erasing the heart of that community." Emma's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. That center has served Roxbury families for 30 years. We run after-school programs, job training, senior activities. We're not just a building, Julian. We're a lifeline for people who have nothing else. I understand that, but the building itself is falling apart. I've seen the inspection reports. The roof is failing, the electrical system is outdated, the plumbing barely functions. How much longer can you keep it running? As long as I have to. Emma's eyes flashed. My mother kept that place going through recessions and budget cuts and everything else life threw at her. I'm not going to be the one who lets it die. Julian ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. And what happens when the roof finally caves in? When the electrical system causes a fire? Emma, I'm not the villain here. That building is a disaster waiting to happen. Then help me fix it, Emma shot back. You've got billions of dollars. You could renovate the center, make it safe, make it better. Instead, you want to bulldoze it and put up another soulless luxury building that the people who actually live in that neighborhood can't afford. That's not fair. You haven't even looked at the development plans. I don't need to. I've seen what happens when developers like you move into neighborhoods like Roxbury. Property values go up, rents go up, and the people who've lived there for generations get pushed out. You call it revitalization. I call it erasure. The words hung in the air between them, harsh and accusatory. Julian's jaw tightened, and for a moment Emma saw the ruthless businessman beneath the man who'd held her so gently on the terrace. You don't know anything about me or what I'm trying to do. Don't I? You're Julian Montgomery, billionaire developer. You build monuments to wealth and call it progress. You're exactly who I thought you were that night. I was just too caught up in the moment to see it. That hit home. She saw it in the way his expression crumbled, the way he took a step back as if she'd physically struck him. Is that really what you think? That everything that happened between us was fake? Emma wanted to say yes. It would be easier that way, simpler to write off that magical night as a mistake and move on. But she couldn't. Because despite everything, despite this betrayal, she could still feel the echo of his touch, could still remember the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd asked her to dance. I don't know what to think, she admitted quietly. I don't know how to reconcile the man on the terrace with the man whose name is on this letter. Julian moved to his desk, pulled out a thick folder, and brought it to her. These are the development plans. Take them. Review them. You'll see that we're including community space, affordable units, programs specifically designed to benefit existing residents. This isn't some soulless luxury project, Emma. It's my attempt to do development differently, to prove that profit and social responsibility can coexist. Emma took the folder reluctantly. And the community center? In the current plan, it would be demolished and replaced with a new facility as part of the complex. Larger, better equipped, up to code. We'd work with your organization to ensure continuity of programs during the transition. You'd work with us? Or you'd decide what we need and tell us we should be grateful? Emma shook her head. That's not the same thing, Julian. That center isn't just a building with programs. It's history. It's my mother's dream. You can't just replace that with something new and expect it to mean the same thing. Julian's shoulders sagged. Then tell me what you want. Tell me how to make this right. I want you to walk away from the deal. Find another block to develop. Leave the center alone. I can't do that. The board has already approved the project. We've invested millions in planning. If I pull out now, there will be consequences. Consequences, Emma repeated bitterly. Like what? You might make slightly less money this year. Poor you. That's not fair, Emma. You're asking me to choose between my business and you, and that's not a fair choice. I'm not asking you to choose me, Emma said, her voice breaking slightly. I'm asking you to choose what's right. To choose community over profit. To be the man I thought you were. Julian looked at her for a long moment, and Emma saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Business versus heart. Practicality versus emotion. The man he'd been versus the man he might become. Finally, he spoke. Come with me tomorrow. Let me show you the neighborhood, show you the plans in context. Let me prove to you that this project could actually help the community. Julian, I don't think that's going to change anything. Please. He took a step closer, and this time she didn't retreat. Give me a chance to show you I'm not the enemy. Give me a chance to find a solution that works for everyone. That's all I'm asking. Emma wanted to refuse. Every logical part of her brain screamed that she should walk away, that this man and his company represented everything threatening her mother's legacy. But there was something in his eyes, a desperate sincerity that reminded her of the terrace, of dancing under the stars, of feeling like she'd finally found someone who truly saw her. One chance, she said finally. Tomorrow. But if I'm not convinced, I'm going to fight this with everything I have. I wouldn't expect anything less. Julian's lips curved into a sad smile. Thank you, Emma. For not giving up on me yet. She should leave. She should take the folder and go, maintain distance and professionalism. But her feet wouldn't move. She stood there, clutching the development plans to her chest, staring at the man who'd turned her world upside down twice now. Why does this matter so much to you? You could have any project manager handle this. Why are you personally fighting for it? Julian hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Because you were right that night on the terrace. You said that people like your mother make cities worth developing. That buildings are just steel and glass until people give them meaning. That stuck with me. For years, I've been building monuments to success, creating spaces for people who already have everything. But what's the point if none of it matters? If none of it actually improves lives? He moved to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to glow in the dusk. This project, the Roxbury development, it was supposed to be different. My chance to do something that actually mattered. To create affordable housing in a market that desperately needs it. To prove that development doesn't have to equal displacement. And then I met you, and suddenly it all became real. Not just plans and projections, but actual people with actual lives and histories. Your mother's dream. Your legacy. I can't ignore that.